Hello, everyone, and welcome to the round 4 and round 5 recap of Ottawa Winter Open. So, I started the tournament with 3 consecutive wins. The first game was pretty smooth, but the next 2 games, one of them was super scary. My opponent blundered in one move, and for one of them, against my friend Amir Bahmani, I had to grind for more than 5 hours, 117 moves, and somehow we got here to the top board 3 out of 3 facing International Master Johnathan Han. So in round 4, I was facing against Johnathan. He's an international master. He's 15 years old and he's been improving super fast. And since I came to Canada in 2021, I faced Johnathan 3 times before. And all 3 times I was playing with the black pieces. So this was the first time I was playing him with white. And also, the other interesting point is that the all other 3 times I faced him, I was the higher rated player, and this time I'm the low rated player. So it's an interesting shift in dynamic. I'm playing with white as a low rated player against Johnathan. And I have to mention that in the 3 games that we played before this game, we had 1 win for me, 1 win for him, and 1 draw. So pretty equal and interesting matchup over the years. So in round 1 and round 3, I played d4. In round 1, I played the London system. Round 3, I played d4, c4. Uh, and I was looking at Johnathan's games, deciding what to do. And I saw he plays a lot of systems against d4. I saw he plays King's Indians sometimes when he wants to play for the win. I also saw that he plays knight f6, e6. And I was even thinking to maybe do some targeted prep here with knight f3, d5, knight c3, or even some Catalan. But then I saw even in those positions, he played many different moves, even in the last 2 years. So I was like, it's going to be very difficult to anticipate whatever he's going to play against d4. But on the other hand, I saw that against e4, he always goes Sicilian. So I decided to play the Alapin. And before the game, I just reviewed all of my Alapin lines as much as I could. I couldn't really guess what he's going to do because he only had 1 game against the Alapin. And he actually ended up playing that exact same line, but usually I don't trust just 1 game, especially with such a high caliber of player. So yeah, I prepped almost everything. I reviewed most of the lines that I knew that I wasn't well aware of. But Johnathan plays d5. I took on d5. Queen takes d4. Now he plays knight f6, knight f3, and now he plays e6. So against this line in Alapin with black, there are 2 different strategies. Like sometimes black puts the bishop outside the pawn chain, either on g4 or f5, and sometimes black just keeps the bishop inside with e6 and tries to focus on developing the other pieces, and that's what Johnathan goes for. And now I play this interesting move knight a3. It might look odd in the first glance because black can just take on d4. And if I take back, there's going to be bishop takes a3, compromising my pawn structure, or also throwing this check on b4 can sometimes be a little bit annoying. But the idea is that if black takes, now I play knight b5, threatening knight c7, winning the queen. And once black stops that threat, white is going to take on d4 with this knight. So this is basically the idea of this line with knight a3. So Johnathan plays knight c6, and now I play bishop e3. And now my idea is that I want to take on c5. I'm threatening to win a pawn on c5, because if black trades the queens, now the bishop on e3 is going to guard the pawn. And if black doesn't trade queens and just goes bishop c5, I will trade queens and I will win a bishop on c5. So black basically needs to take on d4. There's also this interesting knight g4 line, is pretty rare, but pretty interesting to look to if you want to surprise your opponents out of the opening. So Johnathan takes, and now I play knight b5 as expected, threatening knight c7, and knight b takes d4. And here there are 2 main moves. There's queen d8 and queen d7. Johnathan goes with queen d7, I take on d4, and now he plays bishop e7. So far, we're actually following the only game that Johnathan had in the database, which was against the Uzbek Grandmaster, Jurabek Khamrukalov. And Joubek in this position played queen a4. And the game ended in a draw. My preparation was a little bit different. In this position, I prepared knight takes c6. So now if he takes the b pawn, his pawn structure is going to be a little bit worse. He's going to get two isolated pawns on the a and c files. So he takes the queen, and now I play knight e5. And now the problem is if he goes queen c7, I'm going to have all these annoying checks with bishop e5, queen a4. But he goes queen e4, stopping queen a4 check. And now I play queen d4, we trade queens, and now he plays knight d5, preparing to play f6 and kick my knight on e5 away. So I give this check, I develop my bishop with tempo. Now he goes king f8, I long castle, and now he plays f6. So far, we're both in preparation. 15 moves of play, and both sides are kind of blitzing all of these moves. But I was pretty happy with this position, especially because now Johnathan is a high-rated player. I play knight d3, and I was like, it's a pretty much equal endgame. I have a slight lead in development. My rooks are easier to bring into the game. And I felt like it's going to be so difficult for him as a high-rated player to create winning chances. So I kind of felt like this sort of position is going to give me that risk-free edge where I can keep pressing him without giving him that many chances to play for the win. He goes king f7, I go rook h e1, and please note that e5 is usually not so good in this position. For instance, if he goes e5 here, it's going to be pretty bad for him because then I'm going to sack the bishop on e5, he's going to take back, and now knight takes e5 check. Now the knight on d5 is hanging, king e6, bishop c4, or even knight c4 is going to win this d5 knight. So he plays rook d8, pretty normal move, and now I played a very interesting move. It's a committal move, but after a long think, this was my first long think of the game, I felt like it's just a good move that gives me a great position. I played f4. So the pawn moves like this can always be committal because it weakens some squares on e4, for instance. In some world, maybe he can exploit this square in the future, or maybe exploit this diagonal in the future. But I felt like for now it fixes this pawn on e6, so this bishop is going to be stuck there defending the pawn on e6. At the same time, I can build this pawn chain with pawns on h2, g3, and f4 without allowing him much counterplay. Johnathan plays h5, stopping me from playing g4, f5 ideas. And if I go h3, he can always go h4 and cripple my pawns. So I played bishop c4, good move, putting more pressure on this diagonal and especially the pawn on e6. We played g6, and now here I was planning to double the rooks on the e-file initially, but then after a while I realized that if rook e2, there might be some shenanigans that he might be able to do with some e5 takes bishop g4. Of course it doesn't work, computer says it doesn't work because this pin is just so annoying, but I was like, why should I give him all these chances? I go rook d2, more chill, he goes b6, now rook d2, tying this bishop down to the defense of the e6 pawn. So here I was starting to get a little bit confident. I was like, I'm having some serious pressure with my bishops and my rooks, and this pawn e6 can't really move. Johnathan played bishop d6, I played g3, and now bishop back to f8. So here's the moment where I was slightly better, but I didn't find the best way to press for the win. I played the move a3 in the game. My idea with a3 was that I was thinking about moves like knight b4 to try and get rid of this knight and maybe open up my bishop, putting more pressure on the e6 pawn. What I should have done was to play h3. The idea with h3 is that I'm going to go g4, go g4, trade off these pawns, and then maybe go with f5 to try and liberate this bishop. The thing is, after a move like bishop h6 as well, I can simply go king c2, and now the next move is g4 anyways, because black can't really take on f4 with a knight. If black does that, then I'm going to do the same on e6. All of a sudden, pawn f6 is going to hang, rook e7 is going to come, and he's going to be in deep trouble. And in fact here, Johnathan is in a very tough position if I had gone for this. And the best he has is actually finding this maneuver to bring the rook into the game, like rook b8, rook b7, which is not an easy move to find, I have to say. Anyways, I played a3, and after bishop d7, so he's trying to liberate his pieces, I played a very interesting move, which is not the top engine move, but I kind of liked it, and I still like it, and that's the move f5, sacrificing a pawn. So computer gives some weird lines, which I don't think any human would have played. So especially after playing a3, computer gives a4, which there's no way I play a3 in a game and then play a4 to move after. And the idea is also pretty subtle. Like, in the long run, you're preparing these a5 breaks, but you're not going to go for it right away. After rook c8, you're just going to go b3, consolidate your position. And once you did that, you're going to slowly start improving with some king b2, maybe rook a1, a5, and just very slowly try to put pressure and claim that black's pieces are not going to get active anytime soon. So I played f5, and after f5 he took, bishop takes d5, cd5, oh, sorry. After f5, gf5, bishop d5, ed5, and now knight f4. I felt like I have such a great position. So temporarily I'm down a pawn, but I have the control over the only open file of the position. My bishop 1d4 is very strong. My knight on f4 attacks 2 pawns, and I'm going to win one of them. And his pawn structure is just terrible. So I felt like this is really good for me. I have serious winning chances. But I kind of underestimated the power of the bishop pair. So Johnathan plays h4, sacrifices a pawn. I saw that too. I thought I'd take and go bishop e3. And here I evaluated this position as better for white, because first of all, I have the distant passer on the h file, and second, he has this extra weakness on d5. And I felt like there's no tactics. So Johnathan plays bishop b5, which I think is the most normal and human move, but he had this insane idea with d4 as well, which we both missed. The thing is, I can't take with a bishop, my knight is going to hang. If I take with a c-pawn, he's going to give this check on c8, play bishop b5, kick my rook away from the e2 square. Now if I go rook d2 to try and defend the d4 pawn, he's going to go rook e8. And all of a sudden, there are threats down the e-file. And I'm going to have to come back, and now rook e4, and all of a sudden, black is the one putting a lot of pressure. So the best I have is rook f2, and black now has this rook e8 idea again. But also there's this second idea where he can take. If I take with a bishop, then rook d4. And if I take with a rook, then he's going to exploit the second rank. And I'm going to be the one who needs to be more careful to hold this position because of black's activity. Anyways, Johnathan didn't go for it. He played bishop b5. I played rook f2. Rook goes to e8. And here, you can pause the video and try to find a move that I found for white. It's actually a pretty interesting move. Yes, the best move in this position is to play knight to g2, because not only it defends the bishop, but also it defends the rook. So now I'm threatening to take this bishop on h6. Another move that I was considering was, of course, taking this pawn on d5, but I just thought it's way too dangerous, because now rook e5 comes. Now I can't really take the bishop because the rook is not guarded, so I have to retreat the knight. Now he's going to double the rooks on the file. Now after king d2, at least he's going to have some sort of perpetual here, and he can even try to play for more with the activity that he has. So I didn't like that. I decided to go with knight g2. He took on e3, and now I took with a rook. Now he found a very nice move, rook to e5. So his idea is that he wants to give up the pawn on f5, but in return he gets the big center and also an active king. So here was the last one where I could realistically play for the win. The idea that I could have gone for was to play h5, just simply push the passed pawn, and after rook h8, just to put my rook behind the passed pawn, like this. So here, the game could continue something like rook e4, knight f4, and now d4. And after all of that, we're going to get a position like this, where the pawns are equal. I have this distant passer with a rook behind it, so I can pretend that I'm playing for the win. But I would say that this is still completely holdable, and there's also a lot of different moves that black can play and try to hold this position. So I played king d2, and now Johnathan finds a really good move, rook to d8, preparing d4. Now I was starting to get a little bit scared. So one idea that initially came to my mind in the game was to go rook f4, rook g8, and now drop this rook back to f2. But then I was a little worried of rook g4, now preparing d4 from this side of the board. So if d4 happens eventually, I'm going to be in a little bit of a trouble with my weak king. So I didn't like that, and I decided to just capture the pawn on f5 and then play rook g5, keeping the pressure on these pawns, and maybe hoping that in the long term this h-pawn becomes dangerous. Johnathan plays d4 as expected. I took the pawn on d4, took back with a rook, and here I made the right decision. You guys, both moves are holding, but one of them is practically much better. You guys can pause the video and think, would you go to c3 or e3 in this position? I think I chose the correct square, which gave me a pretty simple draw. I played king to e3. If I had gone king c3, he would have given this check on d3 and then played rook to h3. And now all of a sudden, my pawn on h3 is going to drop. And if that happens, then his rook is already behind my passed pawn on the h-file. And his king is going to support this e-pawn, which is going to be much, much more dangerous than this h-pawn. In fact, here I have this bailout move, knight f4 check, to trade my knight with a bishop, and then try to hold this endgame down a pawn. But this king is so active, and the rook is going to go passive defending this pawn. So this is a pretty much easy hold for white. But anyways, I played king e3, which I think was even more simpler. The idea is that now if he gives this check, I'm always going to go king e4, attacking this pawn on e5. So he can't go rook d5 because of the check, so he has to repeat. And now Johnathan tries one last trick with king to f6. And his idea was that he was hoping I go knight e1 with the idea of rook takes h4, rook takes e5. But that does not work because of bishop c6, brilliant move, stopping this knight from coming to f3, and now my rook on e5 is actually trapped. The rook simply doesn't have any squares, and if knight d3, then rook h3 check, sacking the rook on the knight and then winning the rook on e5. Fortunately, I didn't fall for it. I just simply played rook to h5, keeping the pressure on the e5 pawn. So now Johnathan gives the check, I go king e4, same threats on e5. Again, if he goes rook d2, trying to harass these pawns, I always have this intermediate check rook f5 to really force the king to the corner and then take the pawn on e5. Or if he goes to e6, then I take it with check. So he can't really afford doing that, so he has to kind of repeat moves. Otherwise, he has not much to make progress. Bishop c6, rook h6 wins the bishop. So he also decided to call the day and just repeat moves, and here we agreed to a draw. Pretty solid game from both sides. I was pretty happy with this game. Maybe after the game, right after the game, I wasn't, because I felt like around this point where I got this knight on f4 with these weak pawns on his position, I thought I was much better. But then after the game, I saw that I never had a really big advantage. I think my only real chance to play for the win was to go with h3 and then with g4, quick g4 ideas here. But aside from that, I think it was a pretty solid game from both sides. No huge mistakes or inaccuracies from either side. Pretty solid, I would call grandmaster draw that we had here. And I moved to 3.5 out of 4. So going into the last round, I was having 3.5 out of 4 points. And there were 2 other people who joined us in the league who won their games in round 4, and they also had 3.5 out of 4. So in round number 5, I was facing a very tough task. I was playing against Grandmaster Shawn Rodrigue-Lemieux, who's a great friend of mine. He represented Canada on board 1 of the Olympiad this year. So he's basically the most, I would say the strongest active player in Canada right now. And I was facing him with the black pieces, so it's the toughest pairing that I could have asked for in the last round. On board 2, Johnathan was facing a challenging pairing, Vincent Latour. With the white pieces, he's like 2200 FIDE. So Johnathan got a much easier pairing than me in the last round, but of course still a very challenging pairing. But I was playing black against Shawn, so it was a scary game. I faced Shawn 4 times before this game in classical tournaments. Oh, the first time I was white, I managed to beat him in 2021 with the white pieces. And the next 3 times I was black, where I had 2 losses and 1 draw. The first time he played e4, he crushed me in a Caro-Kann. The second time he played d4, we played a QGA with d takes c4, where he had to like grind me for 4.5 hours in a very long game, and he still won. And the last time in Canadian Championship this year, he played e4, and then I played e5, and it was another long game where I actually played very solid. I didn't give him much chances, and he overpressed a little bit. He overextended his pawns, and he got into a little bit of a trouble. And before it gets really bad, he offered me a draw, which I took. So this is my game history against Shawn. And honestly, before this game, I was mostly anticipating him playing d4 or c4. I didn't think he's going to repeat e4, e5, because I feel like he's not the sort of player who really loves facing e4, e5. And he also has his trademark move a3, which even played in like World Youth Chess Championship, World Under 18 Championship that he won in a very serious and crucial game, and he actually won that game. And he never played this move against me in classical games, so I was honestly anticipating d4 and c4, and I had to look at some lines that I was planning to play, which I'm not going to reveal here. But he showed up and played a3, which was kind of surprising to me. With a3, I just had a rough idea what I'm going to do. I played knight f6. Now I played d4. I played d5. He played knight f3. And he always tells me his idea is that he wants to play his black repertoire with a3, and sometimes this a3 move is super useful. For instance, if I go c5 and try to play it like a queen's gambit, he can always take and try to cling on to the pawn with b4. So like it's already a little bit more difficult. I have to play either a Colley system or a London system if I want to like play my white repertoire against him. So I decided to go with a reverse London. And here, what I was anticipating was the move c4. And the line that I didn't want to go for is the normal London line that I play as white, which is with e3. Here, I didn't want to go e6 because after queen b3, I have to actually play b6, which I didn't like with my bishop on f5. The point is, if the pawn is on a2, black can play knight c6, and if queen b7, then knight b4. But with a pawn on a3, my pawn is in a real danger, and I have to go b6, which I didn't want to do. So against c4, my plan was to actually take, after e3, e6, bishop c4, knight bd7. We are playing some sort of a queen's gambit accepted now, where the a3 move is useful. Like after knight c3, I can't go bishop e4, but it's not that useful. It's not like the main way where white goes a3 in these lines. So here my plan is to go maybe some a6, c5, maybe some bishop d6, knight e4, and black's position is pretty much fine. But Shawn decided to, instead of c4, play bishop f4. And that was kind of surprising to me, because after e6, e3, bishop to d6, black is starting to like trade pieces and get closer to equality. So it seemed a little bit unambitious from Shawn to play like this. And it seemed even more unambitious when he played bishop d3. When I played bishop d6, I was anticipating knight e5, playing something similar like I did in round 1 with some bishop e2, g4, h4. And I was actually planning to go on a long think and try to actually find the best way to deal with this idea. But Shawn played bishop e3, which made me pretty happy. Felt like he's not in the mood for a super long fight. I took the bishop, he took with a queen, and here I was thinking to take on f4, but after ef4 it gives this e5 square away, and I really wanted to strike the center right away with c5, and it's not possible here to do that because then he's going to go queen b5 check. Like, Engine says it's possible, but I just didn't want to give him extra shenanigans. So I was like, let's just castle first. And now after knight bd2, I took on f4 with the idea to go with c5 as soon as possible. So he took, and now I play knight bd7. Even c5 right away is possible here. It's not a bad move. But I didn't want to give him any shenanigans. I played knight bd7, preparing c5, and if he goes b4, I can always go a5, and his pawn structure is going to be bad with all these holes. So he castled, and I played c5. So I was pretty happy with this position, and I was like, okay, I was starting to ask this question, how is he going to generate winning chances here? Black's position is devoid of any weakness. Like, my pieces are very harmonious. My rook is going to come here, queen going to go here. I might even get like 2 central pawns against none, try to like put this knight on e4. So I felt like black, if anything, black is even better here. And my observation was approved when Shawn played knight e5 and simply offered me a draw here, which I accepted. Pretty quick draw, 11 moves. I was kind of surprised that Shawn didn't play for the win with the white pieces. So we had a nice conversation after the game. Of course, he's a good friend of mine, and he told me after the game that he wasn't feeling for a very long fight, and his idea was to try and play the opening, see what he's going to get. If he gets a good position, he's going to play for the win and actually try to grind me. But if he gets a position like what he did in the game, his plan initially before the game was to offer me a draw as well. So it wasn't a pre-arranged draw. Like, we didn't talk about making a quick draw before the game or anything like that. Like, I was actually preparing some lines against d4 and c4 to be ready. But it was kind of a pleasant surprise for me that he wasn't in for a long fight. Of course, it's always a good experience to play against such strong players, but at the same time, it's always nice when you had such a great tournament, 3 wins in a row, 1 solid draw, not to ruin your tournament with 1 loss in the end. Because, you know, even having such a great tournament, if I lose this game the last round, it kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So having this draw and gaining rating in literally every single game of the tournament actually made me feel great after this tournament. Pretty quick draw, pretty chill, and after this draw, I actually managed to hit 2261 FIDE, which is my peak FIDE rating right now. So I'm only 39 points away right now from 2300 FIDE, which is going to be the FM title. Of course, every tournament is a new challenge. I shouldn't get too carried away, and I should keep doing what I'm doing. I've been in a great form recently, so need to stay positive and humble at the same time, and try to just give my best in every single game. At the same time, I also hit 2400 plus Canadian rating for the first time in a non-provisional way. So it's the first time I have a 2400 plus established non-provisional CFC rating. So currently, right now, I'm basically at the peak of my chess career. I've been doing great, but there's another big tournament coming up starting this weekend from tomorrow. It's the Hard House Reading Week tournament, so wish me luck. Make sure to let me know your comments about each of these games in the comments section down below. And please stay tuned and follow my games in the next tournament, which is going to be the Hard House Reading Week Open. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed these recaps of the Ottawa tournament, and see you guys soon with more recaps. Have a great one. See you soon, and goodbye.